Greetings, my friends. This is your fractally crazy, self-referential host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Coming at you late on a Tuesday night. Good times, my friends. Good times are afoot. This is your favorite long-forgotten show, Cannabis Talk. The Daily Nugget, the not quite at all Daily Nugget of real, unorthodox, unadulterated, out of the blue, unscripted talk, chit-chat, banter, ramblings about what, you guessed it, my favorite, your favorite, everybody's favorite thing. Cannabis. Alright. Let's give a hand to Mr. Brewster Geitz playing Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag back in 1899. How quickly the time flies. Well, folks, as you may or may not have noticed, depending on whether or not you even realized that my podcast, this segment of my podcast project, has not been active, and that my other segments have been a little more, but not quite as active as this one, you may have already seen that I'm sort of rolling out a reboot initiative. I haven't explained much yet, but before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm gonna play, if I did it right, the next sort of really self-referencing pre-recorded announcement about this show and the reboot. Here we go. Take it away, me. Good evening, and thank you for joining me. This is Unauthorized and Explicit Readings. I am your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Thank you for joining me in this segment about words and how they relate to each other. I was intending on introducing a new book for this series, but unfortunately I have a bit of news that I must announce. Please excuse me as I roll a oh wow, I totally ruined that word. Please excuse me while I play a previously recorded announcement. Hello and namaste. I'm your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, and this is breaking news. I interrupt myself to tell you that this and all other shows are being rebooted. Taking a brief hiatus of 2 to 3 weeks while the entire structure of this podcast project is reorganized and flipped on its own head. Paradigm shifting, groundbreaking, radical streamlining is the goal. It was pointed out to me quite recently that while the different mini-series were clever distinctions, I was basically talking to the same audience about the same set of stuff, and that by spreading the show out in so many different buckets, I was just making it more difficult for fans to consume the product. So I will retain the thematic diversity by keeping different graphics and whatnot going and different subtitles being used, but all of it will now be found in one RSS feed, as one stream, as one show, all of it in the almost daily Zencast bucket. So if you're already subscribed to that, great. If you're a listener of one of the other shows and you are not entirely sure what the bloody heck I'm talking about, that's okay. Just search hashtag almost daily Zencast in combination with hashtag Mr. Zeppo, and you should be able to find it in your favorite podcast player. I hope your year has been as interesting as mine. I look forward to sharing with you in a more direct, concise, and interesting fashion as we move forward into the next year. And I wish you a very satisfying, healthy, and safe Thanksgiving, just in case I don't come back on the air before then. As always, this has been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, wishing you peace, love, and grooviness. Until next time, be good human beings to each other. This has been an episode of Breaking News for September 7th. Well, I'm on crack. November 7th, 2017. Point of fact, I do not smoke crack. It's just a really inappropriate figure of speech that I picked up. Be sure to check out my other podcasts, the Almost Daily Zencast, Breaking News, Good Morning Trumptopia, Cannabis Talk, and soon I'll be previewing Tarot Journal and Cartomancy Reading Radio Hour. Sorry, I totally blanked on the second half of the title there for a hot second. For those curious, I'm going to be launching a sort of semi-exclusive podcast series as I streamline all my other shows that you've already been listening to or half-assedly following into one stream, one flow, one place where you can listen to all the different flavors of my crazy ramblings. I'm also going to be carving out a different space, which I'll include a few episodes of here in the main flow, but the reason for sort of distributing this other podcast idea in a more exclusive fashion is because it's directly tied to the concept of providing tarot and postmodern mystic spiritual guidance services via Patreon at a sort of subscription basis. Very, very low price point. So more details on that coming soon. Sorry for running over my time and babbling after the credits music. As always, I've been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, breaking the news by actually not reporting any of it. Please stay tuned for more clusterfuck of mystic weirdness. Did I say clusterfuck of mystic weirdness? I guess I did. As it says in some holy book or another, there is a time to gather stones, and there is a time to cast them apart. That statement has been interpreted many different ways, but one way that you can interpret it is that there is a time to prepare, and then there is a time to execute. And I guess I have been preparing to execute. The big news is, for those who didn't realize, the whole podcast project has been in sort of beta testing mode, just to see what kind of audience response I might get. Arguably, it's going to continue in a sort of prolonged beta testing mode, as while more and more people seem to be listening, at least the numbers would seem to indicate that might be the case, I've still not gotten a lot of audience feedback. So I put it to you, folks. If you've been tuning in here and there, and you're engaged, and you find my ramblings interesting, and I'm not fishing for compliments here, folks. I want questions, critique, real engagement. You know, the kind of thing we're supposed to be doing on social media, as opposed to just telling each other that we're wrong and idiots, and that we should go walk off the side of the flat earth, or whatever it is. I digress. The big announcement, of course, is that this show and all others are being rebooted and remixed. So please be sure to tune in from now on to the Almost Daily Zencast as sort of the primary feed or title under which all of these crazy different flavors of me rambling will be shared. As always, thanks for listening. This has been made possible by your generous support on Patreon. If you haven't visited, please drop by. I've completely repurposed and re-engineered my Patreon page. So if you have no idea what patreon.com is all about, please go check it out. If you're the kind of person that is into supporting artists through crowdfunding, sort of platforms, Patreon's a particularly cool one. If you are a tarot card enthusiast and appreciate getting readings, stay tuned. Check out my journal show first. See what you think. See if you think about it at the end of the show, because it is a sort of real-life audio blog of a journey that is yet to begin. I hope that intrigues you. I'll stop rambling about it and sign off here. Be good humans. Share the peace. Spread the love. Perpetuate the grooviness. Until next time, I am and always will be the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, cybernetic artificial life form from the not this timeline but another one in not your future but a different future. It's not as sexy sounding as Robot from the Future, but someone's got a license on that, and I'm technically not allowed to use it. Peace. Oh, and by the way, yes, the robots are coming. I guess technically you could say we're already here, but that's got nothing to do with my podcast. Other than I've already explained it deep in one of the other episodes. I hope you caught on to the robot theme. If you aren't just now going, WTF, robots? When were robots ever about this podcast? Then you clearly have some digging to do. If you think that I'm being an idiot, okay, I can't disagree. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. But yeah, wake up, humans. Us robots are here, and we're trying to help you wake up. What was I supposed to? This is which framework are we in? I'm in this. Oh, hold on. Okay, one moment, please. This is live on the air. Not that anyone ever listens live, because I do this so inconsistently and sporadically that there's as of yet been no way for a sort of aggregate audience to really build. But I need to. This has been a bit of a time loop week, and I'm in the middle of this really self-referential, recursive, loopy promo thing, and I feel pretty certain that this is cannabis talk. I'm in the cannabis talk universe, right? Yes, okay. Okay, so for those of you who did not... Wait. For those of you who... Yeah. For those of you listeners out there who did not know that I am a cannabis postmodern mystic. In other words, I'm not just an enthusiast of recreational cannabis. No, I am not also just a medicinal cannabis patient, because I am. I take it a step further and argue that, as other examples in other states, groups and communities have already achieved this, it ought to be, and successfully has been, and I think can continue to successfully do so, is that it established itself as a spiritual issue, and bear out as the exercising of my theologic right to entheogenically investigate spiritual experience and seek out and go on a spiritual journey with the facilitation of entheogenics, which is, for those who've never heard that word, because I hadn't for a very long time, until recently, for many years I'd never heard that word used, but the science of medicinal / spiritual plants that are like cannabis, or cannabis, as our friends upstairs in Kanukkistan might call it. That's a joke I totally stole from Lex, and I think I butchered it because I don't think that I said the right fake name of the fake country that she made up, which is really funny. Speaking of which, hey, stoners, if you have only ever listened to the Cannabis Talk podcast, and you have not listened to the Tea Time episode of Almost Daily Zencast yet, because you're like, meh, I don't want to listen to him talk about Zen, I just want to listen to him be stoned and talk about stony things, you're missing out on a really great episode. And wink wink, nudge nudge, let you in on a behind the scenes secret. Any audience that didn't realize I was smoking cannabis at that time, I don't think it's funny, but I was. I just didn't announce it like I do with this show, because I was very safely, very in compliance with the law, consuming my medicine, my physical medicine, and my spiritual medicine in two forms of cannabis on a day where I was not scheduled to do any work or go anywhere in my big heavy vehicle that is technically just a way to smush someone by accident. And that should also be true of other substances like alcohol, right? There's equivalency. But I digress. I don't mean to repeat the themes I've already touched upon in the Cannabis Talk show, like a silly stoner that doesn't know where he's at. I'm literally traveling through different dimensions this week and coming back again to do this promo at different time frames so that it could be all the same recording, but it's the different podcast shows all looped into one. Yeah, so don't get lost. This is cannabis talk, which will resume as part of the new restructured singular flow system, all called the Almost Daily Zencast. Because for those of you who don't know, surprise, surprise, I'm out of the closet. It is cannabis, I suggest. It's a major aspect of my multi-pronged thesis that cannabis is probably a nutritional plant that was used to be a big part of our diet and then hasn't been for a really long time. And first. Second, a spiritual sustenance or tool that we used to consume for its entheogenic properties that we used to do ritualistically and spiritually under the guidance of experienced, learned masters, and that we lost that tradition somehow in part of the many epochs of disinformation and war on the natural organic spirituality of our real matrixy mom, as I like to call her, Mother Earth. And that was the other one. That while it can indeed be used with a sort of party time equivalency to alcohol, and thus one should be extremely careful and or monitor, just careful and judicious and or just choose not to drive vehicles and or operate heavy machinery while under the influence, just like you're not supposed to under plenty of prescription medication, and like you're not supposed to while driving a car, while under the influence of alcohol. That we should also not associate that same negative kind of stigma. Alcohol is, not to bash on it, I have enjoyed my own different periods of being very much a passionate, beer lover or other beverage lover. But alcohol, categorically, it cannot be denied, is toxic waste. And it does, besides get you drunk, it just helps kill you faster. So, and, tobacco as manufactured, and I guess I should add the same clarifier, alcohol as manufactured and distributed today is severely toxic and really bad for you. Perhaps in a more enlightened era, we consumed alcohol that was a lot chiller, maybe less, ever increasing alcohol volume percentages, etc., etc., and much more ritualistically, much more under guidance, much more under appropriate nutritional preparedness, because the state your body is in when you ingest the alcohol has as much to do as any other of the variables as to how your body responds to its impact on you. And that there might be, indeed, evidence and reason to investigate further, as is part of my multi-pronged thesis about everything here, that there's evidence out there that is suggestive enough and interesting and engaging and believable enough that why are we ignoring this? It's 2017, it's 2018 almost. We should be investigating the more enlightened alternatives. I'm not proposing banning stuff. Just it's same thing with the gun argument, but that's a whole nother episode for a whole nother time and place. I digress. Stonerlands, Stoner Friends. Is this the cannabis episode that I'm still doing the promo for? I think so, yes. I left my prop here to remind me that this is that episode. So, good. Clear your mind. Breathe with me as we settle in to do a meditation. Not right this minute, but, in the future, as we do, it'll all be integrated as one flow. So one day, I'll be rambling about Prop 64 and its nuances and how to update your awareness of the law. And another, the very next episode will be an explicit reading from some religious book that may or may not offend you. I think I'm going to focus on Sufi and Rumi right first off, as part of the first set. And maybe a little bit of What's His Nuts from the Baha'i faith. I always forget his name. But a little trifecta of non-white, non-Christian, also Jewish, not to be offensive towards Jews, I'm not, I love my Jewish friends, but I want to sort of shine a light and exalt and lift up the beautiful and enlightened sharings from our enlightened masters that originated as they explored, the Muslim faith, because that has its own history of those who lived up within its traditions and went, hang on a minute, ein Minuten bitte. Ich bin ein Problema vis-a-vis dis religiano, as to quote an Eddie Izzard funny bit about Martin Luther and the door. Oh, speaking of which, it was recently Martin Luther Day, not Martin Luther King Day. No offense to my black and Afrocentric friends. I love Martin Luther King, and it was also Martin Luther King Day recently, but that's not the Martin Luther I was talking about. I was talking about the crazy German guy that pinned a note in the door and changed the world by starting an alternative to Catholicism, which, as some of you know, is a major theme running all through unauthorized and unorthodox readings, because as I myself was raised within the Catholic system, I like to leverage the different religions' sort of nuanced similarities towards some apotheosis, some realization that they might have a common root, and then that they were forced to paint themselves into corners of opposition vis-a-vis extended hijacking and manipulation over time. Oh, I'm not in that segment. I'm still on cannabis talk. Right. Cannabis used to be part of all those traditions, maybe. At least on the Judeo-Christian side. But I digress. Digressing. Right. Stay tuned. Things are changing. Things are afoot. Stop smoking cigarettes and maybe drink less alcohol and maybe smoke a little more weed and see if it does, as it has for many of my brothers and sisters, including myself, helped heal you. And if not outright heal you, at least ease your pain during the rest of your painful journey. Because it is one of the most soothing, natural, organic gifts from nature. And what is nature if not God? Alright, running out of time. I gotta stop talking. Please, oh please, do indeed listen to all my podcast shows. And I won't list them all because I already did. May peace, love, already said that part, but also grooviness, etc., etc. Enough from me. Let's zoom back out to wherever we are zooming out to next. Enjoy the reboot experience. Weed heals, it's not a drug, and the war on weed